I'm going to do, last year I did the first route, 40 bell.
I gotta go put the thing away.
I'm doing America. This year I'm going to do the first Parker that came to America. And this was not an easy task, trust me. It's very hard to find information on this guy. But before I do that, and I was thinking about this as I was sitting there,
Excuse me.
since I'm the historian and we've lost a lot of people, I just want to do just a little moment of silence.
You want this
for
one?
people that
No.
are gone and aren't here.
It's your turn.
All right. So I'm going to begin this thing. I'm going to give a little history. John Parker. Well, it starts with Augusta, who was married to Cordy Bell. His dad was William. His dad was Joshua. His dad was Samuel. And his dad was John. I'm going to do John, who's the first one here, and his son Samuel this time, because they're both kind of enigmas in a way. So anyway, John was born in Tyrone County in Ireland. It's in the northern part of Ireland, and they were Scot-Irish. And I got a little map here. I'll pass it around to show kind of exactly where it was. Anyway, it was in an area called Ulster, and he was born in Tyrone County in about 1720. So this is going back a ways. And those guys during that time period, there was a lot of clans. You know, they were all clans. So information was very secretive, and it was really hard to kind of track this guy down because there was like 3 John Parkers that came to America at that same time. And I had to trace them down, and 2 of them went off the wrong direction, and I needed one to come in Charlestown town. So I've been for like 3 years trying to search the ship that he came on, and I finally found it. Actually, I found it in this book. I'll pass this thing around. And to give a little history of what was going on in Ireland at that time, England, Scotland, and the island of Ireland were all controlled by the King of England. So they were Irish, Scot-Irish, but they were English subjects. And that was like a confusion to me because everybody said we're English. Well, we were, in a way. We were English subjects, our family was. We were subjects at that time period, the King of England owned everything. He controlled all the land. He gave land to the lords and barons and people like that, and everybody else that lived on that land had to pay rent or do work or something like that. No one owned any land except for even the barons and them. They didn't really own it. You know, they were given it and given control over it, but no one owned it. So at this time, America had been starting to go over that way, and they had a chance to get land and actually own it. You know, it was a king's grant, but it was a little different because they were wanting it to populate over there. So a lot of people were thinking about moving this way. Well, our family, John, belonged to this church, and they were Presbyterians. And the guy's name that ran the church was William Martin. And he was the main preacher in the area where John lived. And he got a call from the Carolinas. They needed preachers over there. And he had a huge congregation. And he talked 467 families to go move with him out of his congregation, to move to the 13 colonies with him. And it took 5 ships to take all of them over. Our family member, John Parker, and he had 4 kids, and his wife's name was Hannah Bryant. And he was on the very first ship to leave. They all left at different times. He was on the first ship, and it was called the James and the Mary. And they left October 18th. I got this here somewhere. I need my paper person. Here's the list of all the ships, all 5 of them, and when they left, and what time they arrived. They left August 25th, 1772, and they arrived October 18th, 1772. And when they arrived, they had smallpox on the ship. Jumping ahead here. Let's stop at smallpox. Last year, the Crowns were from a place in Germany, and their coat of arms was a small fish. I don't know if any of you remember that. Well, the Parkers were from Tyrone County. Their coat of arms are the red hands. So we are red hands. I have no idea what that means. It sounds kind of bloody to me. They were pretty ornery, I'm sure, but this is the coat of arms for Tyrone County in Ireland. Where did I leave off at?
The red hand smallpox on the ship.
Oh yeah, they had the smallpox. So when they arrived in 1772, they had smallpox on the ship. And this took a lot of searching to find these ships because, like I said, I needed somebody to come in down around Charlestown. The other John Parkers came in up in Pennsylvania and New York up that way. So I needed to find somebody that came in down there. All the ship logs were lost, every single one of them, for all 5 ships. There was a guy that did some research, based it on the land that they got and at the time period that they got. He was able to confirm a lot of these people. John Parker, his land ended up kind of north, so his land didn't. But in this book, and I kind of thought he was on that ship, but in this book, when they arrived to the colonies, they wrote a letter back to Ireland to tell everybody back there, the other family members, that they had arrived safely and everything. John Parker signed that letter, and that's one of the evidence that I have that he was on the ship. He actually signed this letter on that first ship. So I'm gonna pass this book around. The letter is actually written in here. And if you want to kind of glance over whatever, it's right here where it's marked on this little piece of paper. That's a letter that they sent back knowing that John Parker came over. So they landed. They landed in Charlestown. It's Charleston now, but back then it was called Charlestown. They landed there. They had smallpox on the ship. 5 children died on the way over. And when they arrived, the governor of that colony quarantined them. And it took 7 weeks and 1 day for them to come from Ireland to the colonies. And they get there and they think they're going to get off, and they get quarantined for 3 weeks at a place called Sullivan's Island, right off of Charleston there. And they had a big house real close there that they used as a hospital. And the smallpox wasn't going away, and the governor quarantined them another 3 weeks before they got out of there. So this was in 1772, in October, so it's late in the year. It was only just a little while after that the revolution started out, okay? So he came in real close, but he had 4 children with him on the ship, and his wife Hannah. Our descendant from him, Samuel, was born in Ireland too. So the father and Samuel were both born in Ireland, and so was William, Joshua, and John Jr. They were all born in Ireland. And Joshua. Arthur and Susanna were the only ones born here in the country that he had. Anyway, he landed, and there was kind of a gap of about 10 months before he got his first property. And so I'm believing, because this happened to a lot of people, they couldn't pay for the ship coming over, so they were indentured for a time period until they paid off their ship, crossing. So I'm thinking he was probably indentured for about 10 months to pay off whatever he owed left on coming over. So anyway, from Charlestown though, once he got that paid off, and about 10 months later, he went across, there's called the Charlestown Trail, which connects up to this main trail that went all the way from way up north, all the way down, and it was called like the Great Wagon Trail. And all the settlers were going up and down this thing. So he shot over and up to a place called Grayson County, Virginia. And it's right on the border. Here's a map. I'll pass it around, but you got Virginia up here and North Carolina right here. You can see where the trail goes up across there. It's on the very bottom of Virginia, the very bottom county of Virginia. And he bought 296 acres there. This is the very first Parker property in the United States. 296 acres. You got a King's Grant.
That page? Yep. Thank you.
296 acres in Grayson County on Meadow Creek. On both sides of Meadow Creek. Land on both sides. Meadow Creek drops into a little river called the New River. That was our first property in the United States. Right there. He lived there for quite a while. And he ended up in North Carolina, the first county at the top of North Carolina. They bought some land there, and that was called Surrey County at the time. Now it's Yadkin County. So they had land just right there, one on one side of Virginia and one just over the line in North Carolina. And they had a lot of land. He had the 296 there. He ended up getting like 1,300.
Thank you.
And once he bought that land, it wasn't like 5 months later that the revolution broke out. And that preacher guy talked him into, he says, we're here, we gotta do our duty, we gotta go fight. So John and Samuel both joined the fight in the revolution. They didn't join the regular army. They were a part of a group that was on the other side of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they were called the Over Mountain. And both those boys joined that and fought in it. And if anybody knows anything about the revolution, the Over Mountain boys changed the war. If it wasn't for those guys, the revolution probably wouldn't have been won. They fought in 2 major battles, the Battle of Kings Mountain and the Battle of Cowpens. And those 2 battles flipped the war. They were losing until those 2 battles, and everything changed. So, we got revolution guys in our family that fought in the revolution, those 2 guys. After the war was over, the country couldn't pay them. They had no money. It was a brand new country. They had no money to pay these guys. And so at that time, Tennessee was being opened up, and the new government decided they would give them property in Tennessee that was coming alive. It's still kind of a territory, but they gave them land in Tennessee in Humphreys County. The whole county of Humphreys County, Tennessee, was given to soldiers that fought in the war. And Samuel took his land there on Trace Creek, which is a little west of Nashville, in a town called Waverly. And I'm jumping ahead of myself. Anyway, we're in Waverly. This here is the will from John Parker. Okay? And it's kind of unique. It lists all of his children as heirs. So every one of the kids are listed on this thing.
Can we put a trailer? Can I take my trailer over to that property and leave it?
Maybe. It's signed. His will was done by James Madison. I don't know if anybody know who. He was president. He became president of the United States later on. He did the will. He was governor of Virginia at that time. He did the will for John. And he passed away. There's not a lot of information on John at all. I mean, it's just very skimpy. This I found, and it lists all the sons, and that's what I needed, you know, the heirs, because I was able to connect this stuff down to these kind of things. And but it was signed by James Madison, and all the children are listed on here. Our ancestor Samuel, his son, ended up with that property eventually. The 296 acres. He ended up with it, and John, no one knows where he's buried. I'm thinking he's buried on this land at 296 acres. I'm 99% positive that that's where he was buried, and stuff. So, but there's no marker, there's no information on it. But he lived there for quite a few years. He died in 1793. So he was there right around 1793. So anyway, he was there for nearly 20 years. That was his place. He owned land in the next county down in Surrey. All of them boys did. They all owned a lot of land down there. But I'm sure that's where he was buried. But anyway, here's this. And his wife Hannah died, and John's son William, Samuel's brother, died, and his wife Lydia died. They're buried right here. Here's a picture of it. This is in Yadkin County, or Surrey County then, but Yadkin County now. This is where they're buried. It's called Deep Creek Friends Church. And they're all three side by side. You can go there, the information is there. You can actually go right up to their markers and see. So this is where Hannah, his wife, is buried. And Deep Creek Friends Church tells me that they probably changed to like Quakers. Because Quakers were they always called their churches Friends Church. So there had to have been something in there about Quakers. I can't find any information, but to be buried in a Quaker church, graveyard. And the difference between a cemetery and a graveyard, I don't know if anybody knows this. A cemetery is the place out there. A graveyard is on church grounds. That is the difference between the two. So they were buried in this church there in Yadkin County. And he owned quite a bit of land there, and his was on two different creeks.
Thank you. Oh, that's nice.
ground zero for Parkers. That is ground zero. They have on Trace Creek. I couldn't locate the property, but there's a Parker Road, and so I think it's right there. And there's a Parker Cemetery. The whole town is Parker, 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 Parker. We got two ancestors buried there. We got Samuel's buried there, and his son Joshua are both buried there that I know of so far. Samuel, and I had a little difficulty on him because when you're doing ancestry stuff, there's stuff on there about Samuel and his wife. It's like he had 10 different wives, and I was like, this ain't right, you know. I got to figure out who his wife was, and I did a lot of searching on it, and I knew her name was Sarah. I just didn't know what her last name was. I found his marriage license, and it's just a really simple thing. It says Samuel Parker at the top, marriage bond for Sarah Richards. Now on the back side of this is all that exists now. On the back side of that probably gave the information, but all that exists is this anymore. So her name, her last name is right there. So her name was Richards, her last name, and that's pretty verifiable there. This is a little map to show where Waverly is.
Oh, thank you.
Humphreys County. I would really like to do that. I've heard that and look it over because there's so much Parker information. The family just rooted in right there.
That's cool.
After they left Virginia and North Carolina, that's where they ended up. It is literally Parker Central. That whole town is nothing but Parker. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. And I never had the problems, you know, with the trouts. When I started putting notes on my thing, the trouts just come unglued on me. I mean, I was getting emails left and right from those guys going, no, that guy isn't related to, you know, that's not in that line. And I'm like, I just put that there because I didn't want to forget the name, you know. But they shot emails at me. I mean, I was getting cussed out by these guys. Parkers didn't do that to me. They're more mellow, I think. so anyway, that's where they were. He had 100 acres there, and so his wife's married. He had a bunch of kids too, and their names. Samuel's kid's name was Elizabeth. Joshua, which is our line, is Joshua. Richard, Delilah, William, and Francis, a girl. Samuel Jr.
Oh, thank you.
and Lucy. Joshua's our line. It's kind of funny because John had Samuel had a son, he named Joshua. William had a son, he named Joshua. And those two Joshuas underneath there, I'm almost wondering if people didn't get it mixed up. If it's the same person or not. I think they're different people because it keeps.
Thank you.
Those two Joshuas is how we ended up in Texas. Both those guys went to Texas. Joshua was probably the first one there. He went down there when it still belonged to Spain, and had a Spanish ranch where Houston sits today, right there. His land was where Houston sits. The other Joshua that went down, he went a little later, and he was one of the first 300 people from the colonies to actually settle in Texas. And his name is on the register and everything. You know, he went down with Sam Houston and those guys. And they were called the Old 300. There's actually 298 of them, but they call them the Old 300. So he was one of the first 298 people from the colonies to go to Texas. And then we just flew him from Texas and Oklahoma like that. So there's a lot of Joshuas in our family, and it's kind of interesting to find it. This is Samuel's will. It's not his will. When he died, I believe they sold the property to this guy. This is a court thing from Humphreys County over that land, and it's signed by all of his kids and stuff. This is like a recorded paper from the area.
You ran like a big pig.
Boy, this is going really fast.
Oh boy, is that?
So anyway, I think that's, like I said, these two guys were really hard to find information on. The big thing for me was to figure out which John Parker came to the United States. That took me years to find that out. Years. And those five
You're so nice. Thanks.
he was on the first one. And all those people were kind of settled there in South Carolina, North Carolina. But John ended up probably way up higher than most of them did. And I looked at pictures of Meadow Creek, where his property was. It's just drop dead gorgeous. That creek is probably as wide as from here to that trailer over there. It's slow moving. It's got rocks in it and stuff. I mean, it's just the coolest place. And Trace Creek in Tennessee, where they ended up over there, Trace Creek is kind of the same way. It's mossy, has a little more waterfalls in it. And so it kind of drops down and stuff, and it's just gorgeous. I've seen pictures, they got stones, so you can walk across in there and stuff now. It's just a gorgeous area. And anyway, Samuel, he died, God, I just handed the paper away. I think it was about 1820, somewhere in there, that he died. And him and Joshua, the other Joshua, went to Texas. After 20 years or so, came back to Waverly, and both of them are buried there in Parker